From what I can tell, a large percentage of the relaxed running audience is relatively new athletes, athletes who are not necessarily looking to break world records, but looking to progress with consistency into a better performance, whatever that looks like for them. And I know that's one of the things in your wheelhouse that I know you've delved into a little bit. But maybe before we jump into that, I thought you could just give a bit of an overview of what it is that you actually do, because you're a woman of many talents.
Well, I am the planted runner. So, what I do is I use science back training, coaching to help the everyday runner, much like you do, reach their personal best through science back training and plant based nutrition. And, you don't have to be 100% plant based to work with me, but that has been my journey. And I'm not someone who preaches that. I'm not trying to convert that or anyone to that. But I think we all can agree that you could use some more plants in your life, and for those who aren't plant based, it's really a place for a safe space to learn to be a better runner at any age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good little overview. The nutrition conversation's a really interesting one in the running world. I mean, you're probably immersed in it far more than I am, but I always find it interesting speaking to different people from different distances who have different perspectives on the world of running. I found it interesting the other side of the spectrum the last couple of years, hearing athletes speak about this fat adapted diet and the rise of
Mm.
the carnivore diet and the rise of fat-fueled athletes. And I mean, one thing that I often am amazed at, in especially fueling for distance running events, is the amount of rubbish that athletes are just more than happy to consume in the name of being fueled. And
Yeah.
so, like, one of my own philosophies or one of my own focus points maybe is I'm not a vegetarian, but I would say that 95% of my diet probably is. There's like one day a week where my wife will cook up a good meal with some meat of some sort in it. But I think, like from my own perspective, I've really noticed just that feeling of health that you get from like a more whole food diet has
Right.
been really beneficial. So even as a central point of the diet, I feel like that planted focus makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as runners, we are all vegans when we run. Nobody's running down the road eating hamburgers, right? We all eat in a way to fuel our bodies. So, whether you are 100% or not, I don't think it actually matters from a health point of view. I think it matters that you're mostly consistent eating whole foods, things close to nature, but you don't have to be perfect. And when you're running, obviously performance products definitely have their place. You're not going to fuel your marathon eating apples, as you run down the road. So, performance products do have their place for sure, but I think whether you are a runner or not, eating more close to nature is probably a good idea.
Yeah. When it comes to consistency and when it comes to longevity in anything, I think diet needs to be a really central focus. And that was one thing that I was really keen to delve in with you in a little more detail now, because I mean, here in Australia, I'm sure it's no different to to where you are. You look at the average diet or the foods that are considered, hey, this is like a healthy option. And so many of the things you'll see on the shelf, which are advertised as healthy or nutritious or filled with whatever vitamins, you only have to look to the second or third ingredient to realize, oh, okay, this is actually probably not a really good long-term option. But how did you make your way down this direction of the planted runner? Because it seems to have struck a chord with so many athletes of so many different backgrounds who are looking for improvement regardless of the level they're competing at.
Well, I mean, it all started, eh, I don't know, 12 years ago, I think. Just a blog for myself. I just wanted to talk about what I was doing and my training and the things that I found interesting. It was almost like a public diary at that point because I'd just fallen in love with running and went down the rabbit hole, everything marathon. I became obsessed, maybe a little too obsessed with the marathon, and ended up doing some pretty impressive things. But along the way, I learned that my true love is not the marathon for myself. It's coaching other runners to reach their personal bests. So that was the transformation I had. But yeah, it's been a journey with both plant-based and running. They both happened about at the same time. And, I think what resonates with people is I just I love this stuff. I eat, breathe, sleep, all of this stuff, and I think it comes across. I'm naturally curious. I want to find the answers. I wanted to find them for myself, and now I know kind of a formula for how it works. I want to share it with everybody. So I think when you find somebody in any field that has a passion, it becomes contagious and you want to know, well, hey, what is she doing? And you want to join the ride. So I think that I had a lot of that along the way.
Yeah. What happened 12 years ago that got you into it?
Well, I first got into running. Well, running has come in and out of my life for many reasons in periods, but at that time I simply wanted to get in shape for my high school reunion. I just wanted to look good, going back to my high school, and I got to tell you, Tyson, I hated every step that first year. It was awful. And it was just a means to an end. And so when the reunion finally came, I will tell you, I did look good at that reunion. And but then I was like, okay, now what? I had all this fitness. What do I do with it? And so I was like, well, I'll maybe run a half marathon. And that turned in maybe I should run a marathon. Now I've got to run the Boston Marathon. Hey, I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I should try to get under 3 hours. And it just started snowballing. And that's what happened.
And so was the plant focus there from the outset, or was that something
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah, so maybe about, I don't know, about 6 months before really getting into running, I went plant-based. I'd been sort of vegetarian, flexitarian, that kind of thing. I watched a couple of documentaries on it and I was just, that's it. This is the way to be. And honestly, I haven't looked back. So I have the personality when I'm in something, I'm all in. That is the way with plant-based. That's the way with marathoning. It's just, I I jump in the deep end with both feet, and that's what I did with both of them.
yeah? What were these documentaries? I bet you I've seen the same ones.
Oh, I mean, the one that did it was the classic, the OG Forks Over Knives.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I've watched all of them since. I've seen them all.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be the center of this. It is interesting seeing the conjecture around diet. Like, I know you said that you're not necessarily prescribing it or saying you have to uh,
Yeah,
follow this particular routine in order to work with you, but like, it constantly blows my mind that the most, like, if you just look at the YouTube comments on any of the relaxed running podcasts, the most heated debates come up around the conversations of nutrition. And it doesn't
sure.
matter whether it's a vegan or whether it's a carnivore. I
Right.
find that the conviction that each side of that spectrum has for their own perspective is pretty heated. And the frustrating thing is, it all seems to be backed up so well with evidence. That's where I get overwhelmed. People way smarter than me debating the nuances of each of each.
Yeah. I think it becomes religion to people and it becomes an identity. And they say, oh, well, plant based works for me. So everybody should be plant based. I think you can find an argument for any kind of diet. I don't think that 100% plant based is any better than 80% plant based. And I think you can translate this to running too. I mean, let's say you have the best training schedule ever, if that exists, and you do 100% of what it says on your training schedule. Are you going to have a better result than somebody else that only could manage 90%? I don't know. I don't think so. I think you both have a good shot. So I think it's more about consistency, not perfection. And yeah, people are going to argue all sorts of things, but the overwhelming majority of the scientific evidence says that fruits and vegetables are good for you, right? I if it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have any meat, but there honestly is not very much evidence at all that 100% meat diet does you any good. But if you do you, if that's what you want to try for a while and you don't mind that your risk of heart attack goes up, go for it. But I mean, the overwhelming set of evidence says that plants are good for you. Whether you have to go 100%, that part definitely is up for debate.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to I can't even remember which podcast it was the other day, and it wasn't from an elite sporting perspective. It was from like an autoimmune perspective where
Mm,
I think it was Jordan Peterson, and he was speaking
okay.
about some of the health benefits that he'd experienced with depression and things that he had struggled with um, through switching to a carnivore diet, which he'd done over the last 6 years. And it was one of those standout examples where I go, because I, like you, feel like I respond so much better to like a plant-based diet. For me,
Hmm.
even the monotony, whether it's training, nutrition, whatever, I kind of need to switch it up a little bit. So the idea of going carnivore for that reason alone is enough for me to go, not for me.
Right.
From like a health perspective with some things, I'm not sure what the evidence says, but like subjectively or anecdotally, there seems to be a couple of benefits for some people making that switch. But as you say, I guess it's different horses for different courses.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on what you are actually eating, not so much what you're not eating, what you're actually eating. So you can call yourself a vegan and you could be drinking Coca-Cola, eating French fries, eating Ben and Jerry's, that's a very different diet than someone who has, whole foods, plant-based and eats very few processed foods if any. So you can't just say plant-based is this or vegan is this because there's so much variation in all of that. So anyway, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for debate, and I really kind of stay out of it. I feel like I'm a magnet for people who already are plant-based, but I I'm kind of preaching to the choir. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not trying to tell anybody, "Hey, come to my side, it's better." I'm for the people who've already decided that this is a pretty good idea.
It's so interesting how that seems to be so much of a more effective way to communicate than trying to convince people of anything. It's like that fundamental religious person. Nothing turns you off religion quicker than the person that won't let you go without preaching at you. And yeah, I mean, you said it well, but that this nutrition conversation, it becomes very religious very quickly
Yes.
if you let it. And ironically, yeah, it's probably the catalyst that puts so many people off getting involved when they feel like they're being preached to. In
Mhm.
terms of oh, there was something you said a few minutes ago, which I just wanted to get back to because I thought it was a good point. You're speaking about how the idea of perfection, we often glue onto that more than we glue onto this idea of consistency.
Mhm.
And ironically, I always find it interesting in my own training. Sometimes consistency does mean that perfection in the way of following a training program gets thrown out of the window because you can do everything on the training week and then
Mhm.
at the end of the week develop a niggle or an injury. Whereas in the name of consistency, maybe taking a day or two or cross training for a day or two could have been a far more empowering alternative in the name of
Mhm.
that long term goal. Did you want to speak to that a little bit more? Because this is something I find myself banging on about a lot. And I always feel that consistency is kind of like nothing rewards an athlete like it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the thing to understand, I think most is that perfection doesn't exist. We make it up. So, your training plan, whether you wrote it or whether I wrote it or whether you got it in a book, is not sent on a tablet from God. It is not, there's nothing special about that training plan that is going to get you the result that you are expecting without consistency. So if you're supposed to run, I don't know, 10K and you can only manage 8, does that make you less of an athlete? No. Does any one single workout matter? Absolutely not. It's the bricks that you're laying every single day that build the house, right? So it's all about laying those bricks. What did you do today? Or what did you not do today? Did you rest when you were tired, when you felt that niggle? Did you eat, right after your run? All of these things are far more important on whether you manage to get every single mile of your weekly training plan in. It's far more important to be a resilient, flexible athlete that just shows up and does an average job than somebody who knocks it out of the park and then can't move for 3 days. So consistency, and we're not just talking about running, right? It's life, it's parenting, it's your business, it is everything in life. You're rewarded with the boring things, consistency, showing up, not being perfect. Perfection is a myth, and I think that runners especially, we're kind of data-oriented people. We love getting from point A to point B just a little bit faster. That's why we do it. So we love those numbers. But once you realize they're all made up, you know, there is nothing special about, a 3-hour marathon versus a 2:59:59. They're exactly the same. And yet we put so much value on these numbers. And if you keep chasing the numbers only, you're going to be disappointed. So I think perfection and doing everything perfect, that's a real type A personality kind of trait, which runners tend to have, myself very much included. But you will get far more rewarded, and you'll probably have a little bit better mental health if you worry more about just showing up every day.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of flexibility with your approach to training is one that, yeah, emotionally and from a mental perspective, I fully relate to. If I've got a training program and something's scheduled for Wednesday, I mean, there was 20 years, 15 years where if I missed that Wednesday session, it'd stress me out for the rest of the week.
Right.
Like the emotional toll that takes on, like the quality of other sessions is mind blowing. Uh, there's certainly exceptions to this rule, but I mean, I often look at athletes like Usain Bolt and Jakob Ingebrigtsen, Faith Kipyegon. It,
Yeah.
it's really interesting the relaxation that they bring into not just training, but their like philosophy around their training. Despite the fact they're competing at a higher level than so many of us, the way they approach it in so many respects seems so much more easygoing. And whether that's just their ability to redirect that type A personality or whether it's more a fundamental part of their personality. But it always amazes me watching Usain Bolt, the start line of Olympic final, like expressing just crazy relaxation and joy and almost having fun when we're standing at the park run 5K. Do you know what I mean?
Completely stressed out. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah, I'm sure they all had to work on that. I don't when I watch Jakob Ingebrigtsen, I don't necessarily think chill in my head.
he's possibly a bad example. Yeah, that's the kind of point.
Yeah, I mean, he seems a little short fused to me, but but his face when you watch him run is a good example. His face is calm. It is just smooth. He doesn't tense up, he doesn't tighten up. He acts as if he's not worrying about it. So maybe that's what is coming across with him. But yeah, but but all of these people you mentioned are fierce competitors.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to calm those inner demons in order to get the best out of yourself, right?
For sure. I think that's a good correction with Ingebrigtsen. What I was thinking when I said it was he had a comment post 1500-meter final at the Olympics last year where he had just finished fourth and like every forum in the world of middle distance running was kind of slamming him because obviously he was favored to win. And as you say, like he can talk a big game.
Yeah.
And immediately after the race, I'm sure it was strategic as much as anything, but he was speaking about how it's just part and parcel of being a distance runner. He can't wait to get back out there and turn things around in the 5K, which he did. But yeah, for sure, that's an exception. None of us, obviously, or very few of us are running at that kind of level. And one thing that has been a theme over the course of many of the conversations that I've had on here over the last couple of years is how we actually build, whether that's build on our training or build on the quality of performance or of mindset, nutrition. One thing that I noticed looking at a number of athletes who I've spoken to here is obviously we peak at very different levels depending on what time we started, how long we've been training, consistency, flexibility, and things like that. But there seems to be a lot more conversations taking place around our ability to compete into an older age. I had Joe Friel up from the World of Triathlon on here a couple of weeks ago, and he was speaking about his training routine at the age of 83. And he was saying how it was only 20 years ago that the idea of training at 83 was it was just a foreign concept.
Sure.
And he said, "Look, I'm pretty young in my training group as well." He goes, "I'm training with a 91-year-old and we've all got goals, but I'm 38. And already I've noticed people around my age group starting to speak about how, oh, we're getting up there in age. And nothing does my head in more, because I think one of the easiest cop outs for not continuing with training is just saying, okay, I'm too old now, and just leaving it at that. But I
Hmm.
mean, hearing you speak about moving into older age with like a more solid foundation to build upon, I
Yes.
think there's a lot of hope to athletes who are moving into that sort of masters age bracket.
Yeah. Well, I think it really, your perspective is going to be completely different if you started running at 15 and really trained hard your whole life. And then you get to the age of, late 30s and 40s. And then you're like, well, how do I improve from here? That's a different story versus somebody who starts at 35 or 45 or 55. The people who start later in life and don't have an athletic background or don't have a running specific background, there is so much hope and potential and possibilities because you're a beginner and your age actually doesn't matter as far as how much you can grow. It's obviously age is going to catch up with all of us, but there's so much that can be developed in training to be a good runner that it takes years. You could have a good decade, maybe 15 years of solid improvement, even if you're past 40. So that's the beautiful thing. Are you going to be an Olympian? Of course, you're not going to be an Olympian marathoner at the age of 50. We have not seen that yet, right? But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to run our own Olympics. We are trying to climb our own Mount Everest, and our goals are going to be very personal and unique to us. Are they going to happen on a world stage? Probably not, but that's okay. I again, it's more metaphors to other things in life. If you wanna start a business, are you gonna say, "Well, if I'm not the next Amazon, I'm a failure?" No, of course not. If you reach success, that's gonna look different for you versus the next person. We're looking for progress, we're looking for improvement, and that definitely can happen probably way beyond your wildest dreams, no matter what age you start.
Yeah. That serves as like an umbrella for where I wanted to direct this conversation. It was something I was really keen to pick your brains around, because obviously we've seen that improvement from athletes that are going into older age.
Right.
We've seen that trajectory, and we've seen that age for a lot of people, especially the example you just gave, is not necessarily a barrier. But there's obviously certain things within the scaffold of building training and building a foundation to be able to actually see you reach that point that are
Mhm.
important to develop. And I know you've got some thoughts around like what some of those most important concepts or most important scaffold pieces might be. Is there any sort of off the top of your mind that if someone's a masters athlete from
Mhm.
40 to 60 and beyond, that they should be focusing on if they're trying to see particular improvements in whether it's times, consistency, or, you know,
I
that
mean,
still makes things work well together?
yeah, the first thing is just start where you're at, wherever that is. So if you have never run, I don't know, a mile before, then you're going to want to work up with to that. You're going to want to start walk run. Walk run gets a lot of shade because it doesn't feel like it's running, but it's actually the best way to learn how to run longer is by taking breaks. Just like training intervals at the track, you take rest breaks in between those intervals so that you can extend the amount of time you are running at speed. Well, the same thing happens when you're learning to run longer right from the beginning. So start where you're at. If you're beyond that stage and you're already running, 5K, 10K, that kind of thing in a row, then you want to look at what is your training. First of all, what is your goal? Are you training for a 5K? Are you training for a marathon? Those are going to have very different requirements. So you want to make sure you're on the right path for the goal that you're trying to accomplish. Then once you have kind of a plan of what you're doing, you want to see what else you need to be doing besides running. We talked a bit about nutrition. The other things that you're going to have to do is rest and recover and do some strength training. I know that's like kryptonite for runners. They never want to strength train. They never want to they never want to lift heavy things. All they want to do is run, but I promise you that just a little bit of strength training will go a long way to not only making you a better runner, more injury proof runner, but you're going to be a healthier, well-rounded person who's probably going to live longer if you have some muscle on you. So strength training is important for every age, but it is especially important for masters runners.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you this lady's name. I was listening to someone. I was driving to Melbourne last night, listening to. Did you ever listen to the Diary of a CEO? Have you heard that podcast?
Yes, yes, I have. I've been listening to a lot lately. He's been having some great guests on lately. Yeah.
Yeah. So this you might actually know, but I don't have my phone here, so I can't tell you. There was a guest on in the last couple of weeks, and from what I understood, she was like a doctor who worked particularly with athletes trying to build longevity or try and build health into older age. And she was speaking about how I think it was with the male last night. She was giving the example of we reach peak bone density at around age 30, and then
Right.
without like a focused effort on developing that strength, a lot of the time, every decade beyond that, we just see rapid declines. And she was saying that a lot of people who struggle are runners for the reason that that you just gave was like running, obviously a fantastic form of exercise, but running without an investment in strength is. I don't know that she said it was like a strong link between that and osteoporosis, or it just happened that a lot of runners who had focused only on that had high incidence of osteoporosis. And she sort of went into the science and numbers of it all, and it
Yeah.
made a lot of sense. It was, yeah,
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, and her name is escaping me right now, but, yeah, the bone health in runners, especially female runners, is a very interesting topic because actually the impact forces of running are good for our bone health. Every time we pound on the ground, it stimulates, our bones to grow up to a point. After we start running, I think it's half an hour, 45 minutes, that sort of bone stimulating stuff stops happening. But running in general is good for our bone health only if we eat enough to support that. So, what a lot of runners do is undereat, especially women, but it happens to men too, sometimes on purpose and sometimes accidentally. But if you're in a calorie deficit while you run, even if you think that you're overweight, even if you think that you're carrying too much fat, doesn't matter. If you're in a calorie deficit, your body is going to steal it from other places. It might steal it from your bones, it might steal it from your muscles, and then maybe it'll steal it from your fat. The place, that's where you want it to be, taken from, right? But your body makes those choices without your input. So if you're in a calorie deficit, you are at risk for bone fractures and worse bone health. And, women probably have a higher incidence of this than men do for a couple different reasons. But in general, you want to eat enough food. You want to eat a well-balanced diet with lots of vitamins and minerals so, that are good for your bones. And yeah, strength training as well is going to help protect your muscles and bones. I don't know if strength training directly leads to bone health, but it's all of it's all blended together, building strong muscles and strong joints, which you do in strength training is obviously interconnected with everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so even if you're, beyond the ages that we just mentioned there, that 30 to 40, that's still something that you're really recommending for older athletes, obviously, because even as you age, there's still so much that we can do to, if not improve, at least maintain that bone
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah. Well, bone strength and muscle strength are incredibly important, because if you slip and fall, when you're older, that can be devastating. But even if you're younger, you're at risk for a stress fracture if you overtrain and you undereat. So, if you're not resting enough, you're not eating enough, and you're just running, 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 that is a serious stress on your entire frame, and your bones definitely are at risk. But if you find the sweet spot where running is actually stimulating bone growth, where you're eating enough to maintain the structure of your bones and your cells and all of your cells of your body, then it can be absolutely magical for bone health. And I'll tell you, I just had a DEXA scan, scan my whole body to figure out, how much bone and muscle and fat I have. And I'm 49 years old, and my bone density was literally off the charts. off the charts. So I'm supposed to be decreasing in my bone density. I'm supposed to be decreasing in my muscle mass. And I am gaining muscle mass at 49 years old because I'm eating, I'm focusing on protein, and I'm lifting heavy things. Right. So just because just because the trend is that it goes lower doesn't mean you have to lose bone health, doesn't mean you have to lose muscle as you age, but you got to fight against it. You have to work consciously to prevent it.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you brought up protein, just because when you speak about plants, the first argument that any meat eater has against that is, oh, but where is it that you're getting your protein? And it turns out so many different locations. It turns out that it's actually far more accessible than what so many of us realize. I think this is a bigger thing in sort of the States than what it is here. But I know in America, there's like an obsession with protein. I feel as
Mhm.
though it seems to be that central theme of so many conversations. But are you focused at all on supplementation, or is it all through like a whole foods diet that, things like this DEXA scan are highlighting how well it is, whatever you're doing is working?
Yeah, I mean, I do supplement in the morning. I'll have a plant-based protein powder in my coffee, but that's only 20 grams of protein. That's not my whole protein for the day. But I do that before I go to the gym because I don't like to have a lot in my stomach, but I know I'm going to be lifting weights, and so I want to make sure that I have that sort of circulating before I start. So that I do start the day with a supplement, but everything else after that, no, it's all from plant based food. I don't track anymore. I take snapshots a couple times a year of what I eat just to make sure I'm kind of on track. But I have it down so that I don't really even think about it anymore. But I'm easily getting 100 grams of protein a day. So even if I didn't supplement, I would be getting 80 grams, and for somebody my size, that's easily more than double the recommended daily allowance for protein. So um, I don't think you need to be obsessed with protein, but I do think you need to pay attention to it. There is a group of vegans out there who say, oh, you could eat nothing but white potatoes and you're going to get all the protein you need. And yes, you might get the very bare minimum. I think white potatoes have something like 10% protein. If you ate, I don't know, 50 potatoes a day, I don't recommend that you do that, but I think that's honestly too low. I don't want to be the bare minimum, and I'm sure you don't want to be the bare minimum either. I want to be a strong athlete till the day I die. I want to have more muscle than the person next to me. I don't want to fall and break my hip. I want to run until I am 99. And to do that, I'm not going to eat just white potatoes. So I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to focus on getting a higher than average amount of protein, but not go crazy about it, not eat blocks of tofu all day long. But I'm going to prioritize a really balanced plate that has a good amount of protein, lots of fresh fruits and veggies, and whole grains and starches.
Yeah. 100 grams is a number that I've heard being used quite a lot on the subject of protein as just a good baseline, regardless of height, weight, gender, to be a good target to aim for. I don't know, like,
I think
what's
that's just because it's easy. It's we love easy numbers, and I'm not about to say 100 grams is right for you or for anybody else. I think it really does depend on your size. It depends on your activity levels. So, somebody who is very sedentary and not trying to grow muscle, that might be too much. And somebody who is a weightlifter, that might not be enough. So I'm not going to say 100 is right for everybody, but I think we kind of attach ourselves to, those round, easy numbers, 10,000 steps, 10,000 hours, the 4-hour work week. We love those numbers to make it simple. And I don't think it's that simple. I think you need to figure it out for you. Lots of calculators online that can tell you how much protein you should be eating as an athlete. But I would say in the United States, our government guidelines are far too low. They just are for basic health, for just staying alive, without your body using your own muscle mass for protein. So I want to be above that for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Protein, yeah, particularly protein. It's one of those areas that I think I'd overlooked for my own recovery and until
Mhm.
recently. I think for a long time I'd looked at sort of build up of mileage, intensity, volume, recovery. But for whatever reason, one of the things that I'd overlooked was okay, like I was eating and I was full and I wasn't doing any kind of calorie restriction. But a lot of the foods that I was eating were, I reckon for a long time there, I was probably hitting 50 grams of protein, maybe not even that in a
Mm.
day. And I was in like a build up for a marathon and I was constantly feeling fatigue. I was feeling as though I had niggles and stuff coming on. And it was a guest on the podcast that mentioned, I think it was a guest on the podcast that mentioned this 100 grams. And for the reason you said, it was easy. I could understand it. I thought that seems like a good target. That's been one little thing that I've refocused on. But it was, I tracked it on MyFitnessPal for a while just because I was kind of, um, I just didn't know what had protein in it and what what to eat
Right.
outside of meat, nuts, and tofu. I was like, okay, what other options are there? But where, like, out of that 100 grams, you said 20s with your protein powder in your coffee in the morning. Like, what kind of things are the other 80 grams coming from?
Yeah, so I do eat a lot of tofu. So I eat a lot of soy-based products. So I can have like, let's say I make a tofu curry, so that's going to have tofu, it's going to have chickpeas in it. It's going to have vegetables which have a little bit of protein. I might have it on a bed of rice which might have a little bit of protein. So all of those vegetables actually add up. I might use some nutritional yeast, which has a crazy amount of protein for the amount, per tablespoon. And then it really just depends on what else I'm going to have. So beans and nuts, definitely. I do sometimes use like a plant-based meats. Sometimes I don't rely on them all the time, but you can find some of them that are really made of pretty whole ingredients. And so when I want like a convenience food, I'll do that. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it that'll add up faster than you might think.
Yeah, that has. It's interesting that you said that about the plant based meats because that is. It seems to be the main criticism of plant based meats that I hear from people is that a lot of the time it's like, why wouldn't you just eat a piece of steak? It's so much more nutritionally whole than what some of these other foods are. But as you say, like I guess as the market gets bigger, there's a lot broader range of cleaner options in that department. Is there?
Yeah, you have to look at it. So if you're looking at, I don't know, an Impossible Burger or something like that, like that's not probably a whole lot healthier than meat. So that's something that maybe you'd use as a treat or you'd use it as a transition product. If you are coming from eating burgers, try one of those as you're transitioning, but that's not a health food. I'm not going to say that it is, but there are other products out there that really are really great for you. So, more come on all the time, but yeah, I'm not a fan of just saying, "Oh, well, just because it's plants, it's good for you." No, I mean, that's back to the, Coca-Cola and french fries that no one's going to call those health foods. So, there's there's lots of ways to go wrong on a plant-based diet or a vegan diet. So you really do have to educate yourself of, learn macros and learn what you need to make a balanced plate. I am definitely not someone who, is going to be the resource for that kind of stuff. I actually was just interviewed earlier today by somebody from the Vegan Gym. I don't know if you've seen them, but if you want a great way to meal prep your whole meal or your whole week, and you want it to be plant-based and hit all your macros and all the micros, get your B12, all of the nutrients that you need. Check out the Vegan Gym. They do this all the time and they're much better expert at something like that than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to enough of Rich Roll's podcast,
Yeah.
as opposed to a number. There's a guy that, as you say, the Vegan Gym. I wonder if he's affiliated with it. I'm blanked on his name. I think he's like a world class bodybuilder, and he's
Mhm.
built like it's unbelievable. He said he's never touched meat in his life, and you look at his physique and you go, surely that can't be true. But yeah, there's some athletes out there that are. I mean, you sort of can't
Yeah.
debate the facts. There's some incredible vegan athletes out there in so many different fields that you go, okay, well, maybe what we're being told about meat is for performance, especially, is
Yeah.
not what it's cracked up to be.
I think I think no matter if you're an omnivore, vegan, and I'm not going to say carnivore, I don't think that's a healthy diet. I'm just going to say that. I think no matter what your diet is, I think if you're an athlete, you have to pay attention to it, period. Just like you pay attention to your training, I hope you're paying attention to your sleep. I hope you're paying attention to your recovery. You have to control your input just as much as your output. If you are looking for performance, if you are looking to improve what you are doing physically, you have to look at what you're putting into your body. I think it's really as simple as that. You can say that this diet, that diet is better, this diet is worse, this is healthier, this is not. You have to figure out what is going to fuel your body, what works for your lifestyle, and you have to pay attention no matter what you eat.
Yeah. I mean, you just said you were 49 before. It sounds like you're in great shape based on the DEXA scan and the consistency of like the training routine. I'm sure you'd have ticked a couple of them off there when you spoke, but are there anything else? Is there anything else that you're really focused on outside of sort of strength, nutrition, recovery that sort of goes into the same category in terms of importance?
Oh, 100%. And that is mindset. Absolutely mindset. It does not matter how strong your legs are if your mind won't take you across the finish line. I think that is something that is it's talked about, but I don't think enough people have a mindset practice. So in my training, I give my athletes mental strength exercises to work on every single week to to practice over and over again. And I tell them, hey, this particular one might not work for you. If it doesn't work for you, toss it out. There'll be another one next week. But if you don't train your mind to be resilient, if you don't work on your self talk, it is going to bring you down and you won't reach your potential. And again, running is a metaphor for life. So you need to learn these skills to be successful in life and in running. And it is just so important. I think a lot of runners use running as therapy, or they use it as part of their mental health. And I think, yes, you absolutely can and should do that, but it's not everything. You've got to have some tools, and you can't just run run away from your problems. You can do it for a little bit, but soon it won't work. And you've got to have a few tools in the toolbox.
Yeah. So when you say mindset, obviously there's a lot of different directions you could take that.
Mhm.
Are there a couple of standouts for you? One thing that I've found really helpful that I've spoken about on here before is just challenging faulty thinking, or CBT. I always find that often when I'm feeling down or flat, not always, but a lot of the time, it's not necessarily that life situations are bad. It's just that I've fallen into a faulty pattern of thinking,
Yeah.
predicting catastrophe, or just filtering any of the positives out. When I can actually stop and treat it like a training program, like, all right, let's just write this down. What's the thought? What's the faults? What's another way you could look at that? If I can do that consistently for a couple of days, I'm always amazed at how quickly I can get myself mentally back into a really good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of tools that you can use, and it depends on the particular situation that you're in. Like, for example, one thing that would happen to me while I was racing is not so much that I would get negative thoughts, I would get very sweet thoughts. I would get thoughts, "Oh, your family will still love you if you slow down," or "Why are you working so hard? You don't have to do this, honey." And so what I've done is I have taken those thoughts and I've personified them and I've given them a name. And I admit it's not that creative. It's negative Nancy. So Nancy shows up, and she is this sweet Southern grandmother who loves me and wants only the best for me, and says, "Oh, honey, you're working too hard. You can just stop right now." And when I do that, it's kind of funny, and I recognize when she shows up and I say, "Oh, that is not me talking. That's Nancy talking. That's Nancy telling me to slow down." And I know she's coming now because she came the last race. And when she shows up, I can say, "Hi, Nancy. You can get to the back of the bus, but you can't drive." And so it's, that little techniques like that. And sometimes the sillier, the better. because it distracts you and it makes you smile, which, as you know, is good for performance. So, there's so many techniques like that that can address whatever your particular issue is. That one was mine. And I know pretty much everybody probably has some kind of voice in their head when things are getting tough. And so that might be a little tip, is to name your negative.
Oh, that's so good. I'm giving mine a southern accent too, because I feel like, yeah, I'd want that person on my bus as well, not able to drive. But no, that's really good. Claire, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm the Planted Runner. I'm very active on Instagram, and my website's theplantedrunner.com. And I do have a free fueling guide if anybody's interested. If It teaches you what to eat before, during, and after a run, and you can grab that download for free at theplantedrunner.com/join, JOIN.
Yeah, awesome. All right, I'll link that for anyone listening. But thanks so much for making the time. I was looking forward to chatting with you. I knew it would be a good one. So yeah, really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Tyson.